Ms. Namika, would you take the roll, please?
Mr. Clausen.
Here.
Ms. Phillips.
Here.
Mr. Taylor.
Here.
Ms. Upchurch.
Here.
Excellent, thank you. To view this meeting's presentation documents, please access Board Docs. The link to Board Docs website can be found via the D38 website, www.lewispalmer.org, on the Board of Education meetings webpage. To view the stream video for this meeting, please go to the Lewis Palmer School District 38 Facebook page and click on the video links on the side menu. Now we will be privileged to have Weeblo's Den #1 from Monument present the colors and also start us off with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Scouts, attention. Will the audience please rise? Color guard advance. Color guard halt. Color guard post the colors. Scout salute. Audience, please place your hand over your heart and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, for liberty and justice for all. Ready, two. Color guard retreat. Please be seated.
Thank you, that was wonderful. I was a little tempted to let him conduct the rest of the meeting. He did such a good job.
Hi, my name is Jessica Pierce, and I'm a junior at Lewis Palmer High School.
Hello, my name is Kaylee Eklund, and I am also a junior.
My name is Caroline D'Ambra, and I'm also a junior at Lewis Palmer.
Hello, my name is Laura Bird, and I'm a senior.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Gerally, and I'm a sophomore.
Hi, I'm Delaney Champion, and I'm a junior as well.
Hi, I'm Kayla Chartier. I'm a senior.
I'm Jaden Schwartzman, and I'm a senior.
I'm Jamie McPartland, and I'm a junior. Yeah.
This is the Lewis Palmer Travel Voices. Thank you for having us tonight.
Thank you.
In looking at my notes, I neglected to recognize our newest board member, Ron Schwartz. As the El Paso County voting records have not yet been certified, Ron officially will not be official until the voting results are certified, which we anticipate to be around the 27th of this month. So, Ron, it's good to have you here tonight, and we're looking forward to working with you moving forward. I'm going to have our Vice President, Ms. Upchurch, briefly read the guidelines for public comments.
Public comments for guidelines per board policy BEDH, public participation at school board meetings. There is one time for public comment, and it is limited to 30 minutes. In an effort to allow all who wish to speak, the amount of time dedicated to each speaker will be dependent on the number of speakers who sign up, with the entire public comment period not exceeding 30 minutes. If 10 people or fewer sign up, each person will have 3 minutes to address the board. The sign-up sheet for public comments will be available at 5 p.m. in the Learning Center in the meeting room. All speakers will be asked to limit their remarks to the time allotted based on the total number of speakers, not to exceed 3 minutes per person. If a group of people have a similar concern, the board requests that a spokesperson for that group be selected. The board respects the rights of the public to speak on matters concerning the operations of the school. We believe that public comments that are critical to district staff, however, often cause unnecessary harm to those employees and the education of our students. As a result, we prefer that members of the public share any criticisms of employees in writing with the superintendent, who is responsible for supervising all staff, and then involving the board as necessary. If you choose instead to address a personal issue publicly, please understand that the board does not endorse the comments of any speaker and reminds all who speak that they assume the risk of legal action by district employees in the event the affected employees believe that any comments about them violate legal standards. Lastly, keep in mind we may have K through 12 students in the audience, so please keep all comments appropriate to our audience.
Thank you, Ms. Upchurch. I'd now like to make a motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
Second.
Questions, comments, concerns? Hearing none, Ms. Namika? Aye.
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 Okay, next we'll be privileged to have a demonstration of learning from Lewis Palmer High School.
I'm Bridget O'Connor. I'm the principal at Lewis Palmer High School this year, and I know as a principal you're not supposed to have favorites, but I have some of my favorites here tonight. Sue Timmer and Shar Armstrong are going to introduce our team of students, and they'll walk you through some really cool things that are happening at Lewis Palmer High School.
Good evening, and thank you for allowing us to be here tonight and share what we're doing in life skills this semester. So we started the semester with two goals in mind. One, that we wanted to allow students to practice and explore some life skills that they may not otherwise have an opportunity to practice in a regular academic setting. And in conjunction with that, we wanted to offer vocational and career exploration, which, when you think about it, finding a job, getting the job, and then being successful in the workplace is a significant life skill. We have 7 participants, 6 of whom are here tonight, 4 seniors and 3 juniors, and they are a wonderful group. They are adventurous, they are kind, they're a great team, they've been very supportive of each other, and they've been more than willing participants with everything that we've asked of them. The other key thing with these participants is they are all on schedule to graduate on time. And that was very important to us as we developed this class, because we needed two, or we asked that we use two class periods for them so that we could better access resources both in the school and in the communities for that career and vocational exploration. The content that we used to develop the class was based on a career interest survey that we administered at the beginning of the semester. We took that information from the students to determine what would be of most interest to them and be most beneficial to them throughout the semester. With that information, you can see we had some guest speakers come in. One significant area of interest for the students was outdoor professions, and so we were able to have Dr. Cerencion from Red Rocks Community College and Bennett Monson, who had actually gone on a Knowles adventure to Patagonia. We also had a professional chef come in, spent the morning with us, allowed the students to cook with him, and gave us the ins and outs of what a culinary profession might look like. We also had Jen McAllister from D38 come in, sign our students up for the Pikes Peak Business and Educational Alliance, which is a great resource for our students to continue to pursue career interest on their own. And last but not least, we had a staff member, Amanda Very, who had actually gone to New York and been on television and done a 30-second elevator speech. And that was significant to our students because they had already heard about how significant 30-second elevator speeches could be to employment seeking. We also used the information to program some site visits and field trips. One of the most significant resources that we found this semester was in the Pikes Peak Workforce Center. They actually conducted 2 workshops specifically for our students, and that is a resource that's a tremendous opportunity for our students to pursue even after high school. Last but not least, the skills and accomplishments of our students are listed here, and we have them divided up into 2 categories of life skills and vocational exploration. I know you're more interested in hearing from our students, so at this point I'd like to turn it over to them, and I'd like to start with our seniors.
Hello, my name is... Hello, everyone. My name is Drew Hess, and I'm a senior at Lewis Palmer High School. In our life skills class, I've been learning cooking skills and trying to present yourself when trying to find a job. What's the most important to me is learn how to create a proper resume and, of course, the 30-second elevator speech. As you can see from my slides, there's an example of a resume, and this is me just chopping some onions for some steak and rice bowl. Here we are at advanced manufacturing, where people use tiny bits of things in order to create useful tools, such as maybe your tables or some other things. The next person who's going to present is Elijah.
Hi, I'm Elijah. I'm a senior at Lewis Palmer High School, and life skills wasn't really what I expected. I expected it to be just like a simple class where you go and you cook, learn a couple of things, but it's like a lot more than you would think. So mainly, I guess, one of the things I learned is how to cook and how to learn how to be financially stable. Not to mention like how to be more self-confident, talking to people, to maybe have an opportunity of getting a better job employment. But yeah, I guess like being in this class, you don't expect like to get along with everyone. Like you expect to do your own thing, but kind of I guess like being a part of a group of people in this class kind of makes it more of like an exciting place to be. There's like a lot more opportunities for you to do instead of just like going and like sitting down, like listening to a teacher. You get to like go like different places, like field trips, and learn how to cook and do new things. So. Next person is Joey.
Hello, my name is Joseph Pylan. I'm a senior at Lewis Palmer High School. I got into class a little bit late, but I've definitely learned a lot, like cooking skills, If I hadn't taken this class, I wouldn't know how to make chips and salsa. But also like how to do a resume, 30-second elevator speech, how to fill out a job application, and a lot more. Next speaker is Eli Cook.
Hello, my name is Eli Cook. I am a junior at Lewis Palmer High School. In our life skills class, I have learned how to cook my favorite food, includes pumpkin bread, blondies, and I also learned how to interview for a job and prepare a elevator speech. What has been most important for me is learning to prepare for the future. And the next presenter is Coco.
Hello, my name is Coco. I'm in LPHS. I am a junior in LPHS. In the life skills class, I learned about cooking skill, how to write a resume, and about different type of jobs. What I have most important is learning how to speak in front of people. The next person is Tara.
Okay. Hi, my name is Taryn Dumore, and I am a junior at LPHS. In my life skills class, I learned elevator speeches, fun cooking skills, and guest speakers. What has been the most important to me is thinking about my career after high school, and I have learned about opportunities for careers. In this slide, I am walking in the job fair where I was learning about this job at the Air Force Academy, where these two guys were at a table. They were very interested in me, and they wanted to have me work for their staff event for Air Force Academy Games, and which I already worked at twice.
So I'm Shar Armstrong. I'm the school psychologist at Lewis Palmer High School. And Mrs. Tammer and I just wanted to talk a little bit about the future for the students for the next few weeks before the semester ends. And we will be wrapping up some life skill instruction in the social skill area, looking at conflict resolution in the workplace, as well as doing a little more exploration with their skill and interest surveys. We will also be wrapping up a service project that the students have been working on. They've been making pet toys for the Humane Society, so they really enjoyed that. We'll be doing that this week. And we have also tried to weave gratitude activities in this semester, so we'll be doing some thank you notes yet, both to the guest speakers that we've had, some of the field trips that we've done to the job sites, and then also to school staff that have really guided their direction this semester with our pilot program. We will be having a parent night in December where we kind of roll out some of the opportunities that parents have to find out more information about how to get their students signed up and started with the post-secondary job hunt, as well as vocational training that they may be interested in. And then finally, we'll also be back in the kitchen. We're going to try a chopped activity. So we've been working on measuring and following recipes and those kinds of things, but now we're going to let the students be cut loose to see what they can do and working together to make the best meal possible. We will also be revisiting the Pikes Peak workforce, which provides a plethora of job opportunities and skills training for our students. So we're looking at that for our seniors students next semester probably. So we're very excited. We have just had a ball getting to know one another and work together this semester, and we anticipate that this will be something that the students will be able to apply as they move forward. Thank you very much. Eli, come on up.
And do you have any questions for us? Yes, sir.
What was your favorite thing to cook?
And my favorite food to cook, I would say, is pumpkin bread. I like desserts.
So do we. Next time, bring some samples.
I have a question. Is life skills a semester or a year-long class?
It's a semester, ma'am.
I think that's all the questions, but wanted to thank you so much for coming out tonight. Wonderful presentation, and if we have another moment, I'd love to hear each one of your 30-second presentations as well.
All right.
All right, the next item that we have on the agenda is introduction of the new Director of Nutritional Services. Mr. Cruz, I think that is you, my friend.
I'd like to introduce Stacy Baker, our new Food and Service Nutritional Director. She's been a resident of Monument since 2012. She grew up in Aurora, attended CSU, and holds a degree in microbiology. After college, she worked in an organ and tissue transplant lab for 2.5 years, and then worked for Tri-County Health Department for 12.5 years. During her time at the health department, she worked in environmental health and supervised the staff conducting everything from restaurant inspections to on-site wastewater treatment facility outbreak investigations. Is that right?
And outbreak.
And outbreak, oh my gosh. She has extensive knowledge in food safety and regulatory compliance. She was also active in programs ranging from West Nile virus surveillance to household hazardous waste. Stacy's married and has 2 wonderful children. I think I heard them back there.
They had to go home.
Did they? Matthew's 4, Caitlin is 1, and Stacy is excited to be working here in the same district that her kids will be attending. So welcome. Thank you.
If I could, I'd just like to thank Stacy because she jumped in on the empty bowl dinner. I think that's the first time I met you, so thank you for volunteering that night.
That was fun. I do have the privilege of working side by side with Stacy, so we're looking forward to having you join the team.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
And I need to apologize to the board. I did things slightly out of order, and I must have been looking at an older agenda. So I have, I think, the same agenda that's in front of you all. So I will start following along with that. And we'll now go ahead and have the public, actually, one more page. Now we'll have public comments. And let me just get my phone out here at the time, and Miris Steffens, am I pronouncing that correctly? Well, let's do it a different way. If you sign the sign-up sheet and you were the very first one, I apologize, sir. I probably should get my reading glasses out.
Red.
Okay. All right. Well, we all know red.
But my concern is that we tried and failed again for an elementary school. At this point, from my perspective, I see a need for 3 of them, not just 1. And we can't even get 1 approved. And in the past, they blamed the seniors. Well, not all seniors are that stupid anymore, because the longer we put it off, the more it's going to cost us. At the current rate, last I heard, it was 17 to 30% per year increase for labor and materials. So if we keep putting it off, that's not going to accomplish it for us. We need to get these schools. And have any of you ever attended a NEPCO meeting? They could help you a great deal.
Mr. Taylor, would you grab that from Red, please? Thank you.
They know about what is happening with the land that's being bought and developed, and they know about water rights, which would be a valuable asset for having a elementary school, because I remember when Lone Tree was built, and they put, whoa. Well, anyway, Lone Tree was built, and we built a school, but we had to go 1.25 miles to get water from Woodmore to satisfy the state requirements.
Next we have Janet Britton.
Make sure it's firm. Jeanette Breton. I just want to make a comment that I appreciate the format of the town hall that happened last week, and Casey Summers stepping up, because I think more feedback was received, as I can see some of the highlights from that meeting. But I just want to thank you for at least having a different format than a mic and a distance. It was nice to have like a little more of a group setting.
That concludes the public comments. Now we'll move forward with the board member comments. Mr. Taylor, can we start with you, sir?
So I would like to just say, you know, I feel very disappointed that our 4A bond measure failed. I also recognize that there's a real division in our community that needs to be overcome. We talk about the need. We have evidence that the district is growing, and children will come as a result of the new homes, et cetera, that are being built. We put together a bond that was as fiscally conservative as ever presented by any school district in the state, and many third-party professionals attested to that. Yet, we dealt with, or our community deals with, misinformation. And that's an unfortunate thing. And sadly, then it becomes not a matter of factual proof or evidence of such, but you can't trust this board, or you can't trust whomever, because the insinuation would suggest that we're untrustworthy. The insinuation would suggest that we don't really care about taxpayers, neighbors, children, school system. I think the prominent message that I will take away from this experience is there is a strong voice in our community that doesn't support public education at all. They want charter schools, or they want private education. And we will fool ourselves if we don't understand this. So, we have an uphill battle because this is a trend for a decade or more. So I'm going to ask our school district, Dr. Summers, to at our next work session, I would like to learn about all financing options that are available to us to build an elementary school without any limitation of what those might be, so that we can really look at everything. Because we're at a point where, what are we going to do? Just do this again and again, and after 4 years I can stop and say, well, we didn't get it done. Which is not the right answer. The fact of the matter is that I actually probably had as much difference with fellow board members as anybody here, but I was able to work with them and find reasonable solutions. They weren't my solutions, but they were ours, and I felt very comfortable in putting those forward. And for the life of me, I would basically appreciate if somebody could actually show me my dishonesty. They don't show up at a town hall meeting to ask the question, what next? They hide behind social media. And they influence our community. Those who support charter schools really don't want choice, because a public education facility is a risk to the charter school. I find it all very ugly. And supposedly we're doing this for kids. I'm flabbergasted to observe the extent people will go to win. And it isn't about win-win, it's about win-lose. And is it worth it? Our community has a great reputation in this state for academics, for athletics, but not as a community. So I'm very disappointed. Those are the harshest words I hope I ever use here. And it isn't anyone's fault. I would own this entirely. I feel like we did a pretty good job of educating the community, but we didn't do enough. We didn't do it right. We have to do better in terms of our education process, of our communication process. I'm 100% convinced that the unsocial media is not the way to educate our community. We have to rise above that. We have to figure out how we communicate so that there's real information, not misinformation that you banter around about. So, Dr. Summers, I'm so thrilled you're here because I've been very impressed by your first 90 and 180 days, and I look forward to working with you, but I really do believe that we, this board, and you and your administration have to do things so openly, so clearly, and without any type of reason to doubt what we're doing, that we can regain trust. Because I think at the end of this process, we have to be able to, first of all, look ourselves in the mirror and know that we're doing our very best. And second of all, be able to communicate the real needs and the real possibilities of how to address those needs, and finally to be able to articulate it in such a way that people really understand it. And then I'll close with this. The one thing I heard that I gave a lot of credibility to was a number of people who said, what is your plan? And I'll just use one example, but what is your plan when the district can't grow anymore? So we really know what's the total capacity of our community and what the demographics might be. Well, what's your plan then? I mean, and they even raised the specter that D11, I think it was, has excess capacity now because the demographics changed. And so what's our answer to that? That was one question, but I had many like that I could have looked to a plan, a strategic plan, a comprehensive plan that would really say, well, this is what we would do. There's some what ifs, and this is what we could do. So the one thing I learned is we really do need to have a comprehensive strategic plan that looks out 5 and 10 years, because that was the one thing I felt I lacked when I was asked some really good questions. Then I've gone back and looked at our policies and so forth. Nothing in our policies suggests that you do a long-range strategic comprehensive plan. What we have is a requirement for an annual budget that we've done year after year after year after year. But we don't have. And so we need to look at our policies, starting with, the objectives are right at the very front, where it says we value long-range planning, but there's nothing beyond that I could find in any of our policies that would present to the admin that this is what we need to do in order for our community to really have a clear picture of what does a sustainable public education system look like in our community. So again, on our next work session, I'd like to have us review that policy and consider some changes to that policy so we can give you proper direction for that specific aspect of what I learned. That would be a very positive thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Ms. Phillips?
Thank you. I too was really disappointed when the bond failed. And I had the good fortune to be able to stay home for 24 hours. But I know that all of our teachers and staff showed up the next morning, and they did what they do best. They went to work, and they taught our kids, and they took care of our kids, and I'm really grateful for that. So thank you to everyone who showed up. I think that my first venture out was to the Lewis Palmer High School musical, and it was fantastic. And to see all of those kids show up with enthusiasm, and there was a lot of music in that musical. I think there were only 2 stops, and I just want to let Mr. Tom Chapman know he did a fantastic job with those musicians, and of course they were the ones, the students were the ones making the music. So I just wanted to acknowledge both theater departments in both high schools. Unfortunately, I didn't make it to Palmer Ridges, but it got great reviews. And so that, beyond the bond failing, life goes on, and our district does what it does, and it does it so well on so many different levels. So I also want to acknowledge our 2 state volleyball. To me, they're both championship teams. I know they went head-to-head, but it was quite an exciting day. I know for some people who were up there in person, but for those of us who weren't able to get there in person, you know we were sort of glued to our phones and getting text messages and getting scores. And what those athletes do at the culmination of their seasons is really inspiring. And also, I know the other athletic teams, the Lewis Palmer soccer team as well. I wanted to acknowledge that I was able to attend several Veterans Day assemblies, and I was so touched. Not only because we have quite a lot of military members in our community and a lot of children in our district who have grown up in military families, but also because we have a lot of veterans here in our area. And at Palmer Ridge, they brought over veterans from the assisted living facilities, and it was so meaningful. And I have to say, I have never in my lifetime been in a high school assembly that everyone was attentive. The high schoolers were so respectful of those veterans, and the veterans were so grateful. And I just think it was such a great show of community, and it was inside one of our high schools, and it was just a great hour. So I think also I went to another one at Prairie Winds, same feeling, same presence of community there. And I think those are the things that we can focus on moving forward as we will continue to make decisions and to present options to our community. It's important that we look to the things that are motivational and inspiring and really capture the essence of the values of our community. I'd also like to mention that I was at recently Palmer Lake Elementary and Bear Creek Elementary, Lewis Palmer Middle School, and the conversations are focused on next steps. What are we going to do next? And I think the answer right now is we don't entirely know, to be honest. But we are making first steps. And even within hours after the bond had failed, conversations began. And conversations will continue. And we had a fantastic community conversation on Thursday night with all of the board members present, with most of the people I see here. Thank you for taking your time in the evening. It was a nighttime event at the Monument Town Hall. It produced the summary, which is now public, of all of the ideas of the people that were there. And there were really great conversations, not just that evening, but continuing. I heard more even up till today. And I think that the more we can start and continue conversations and really listen to each other and try to get at what are our concerns, what matters, and how are we going to address them. So obviously, serving on the Board of Education, my biggest concern is our children and our students' education. And I think that no matter what, as long as we're keeping that lens in front of us, what is best for our kids? It's all about the kids. And as long as we keep moving forward in that vein, we are going to get to where we need to be. It's going to take time. There, as Chris said, there's more educational pieces to be done for our community. We'll keep working for that. We'll keep trying to. We want people to engage. We want people to collaborate. We want people to come to us. I want people to email and call me. We will meet with you, and we are also looking at, in terms of future town hall meetings, going to all the school sites so that we are going to your neighborhoods. We want you to come to your local neighborhood school and tell us your ideas. So that will be up and coming, and all a part and parcel of that long-term strategy development. And I think that's really important, that all of us, no matter our reaction to the bond failing, that we stay engaged and we stay in conversation. And that's how we continue our sense of community here. I did want to give, I have two other things I wanted to touch that weren't related to the bond. One is I had this fantastic tour, if you can call it that, of the basement of Bear Creek Elementary. It's a storage facility, but I just want to give a shout out to Jesse down there in maintenance and the things, the support systems that are there. You know, we see the kids and the teachers, and we hear the reports from our kids' classes and their principals and whatnot. But beyond the site-based schools, the transportation department and the nutrition services department and the maintenance and the grounds departments, they work really, really hard, and they are really, really good at what they do. And if you've never seen a 20,000 foot, I think that's the square footage, storage area, that's really, really organized. It's quite an amazing sight to see. So, and then the other thing I wanted to mention that I did have an opportunity to continue being a part of is the SO Coalition, the Social Emotional Wellness Coalition. And this is a group that is action-oriented, and to the point that this week, QPR training is being offered both at the Tri-Lakes Y at Lewis Palmer High School, both for adults and for high school students. And QPR is, you can think of the acronym like CPR, but it's question, persuade, and refer. It's 3 steps anyone can learn to help suicide prevention. This is something that the students wanted to act on. It was something they thought was important to bring into their high schools. It's being offered at Palmer Ridge and Lewis Palmer on Wednesday. It's a 2-hour training. And I can tell you personally, my daughter and I took the training over the summer. She wanted to take it with me. It has inspired quite a number of conversations with my 15-year-old. I think it's valuable for anyone, any age, that if you are ever approached with someone, or if someone ever approaches you who is feeling suicidal, that you will know without thinking how to respond to that person, how to receive that information, how to not be overwhelmed by it or scared by it, but how to just reach out and help that person. It's to me, it was as valuable as taking a CPR course. So it's in the information. If you need more information, you can either contact Bridget O'Connor at Lewis Palmer High School, or if you are an LPHS email receiver, it came in your email with the weekly goings on, and I'm not sure, Bridget, if there's anything else, any other way to. So it's out there. I highly recommend it. I don't think this will be the last chance that it's offered.
Thank you, Ms. Phillips. Ms. Upchurch?
Well, I'll be the third board member to say that I was disappointed with the results as well. That the next day I was on my way down to the Springs to work on some contract stuff with the house, and I felt compelled to stop and visit with my elementary school, with Lewis Palmer Elementary School and Lewis Palmer Middle School. And there were definitely heavy hearts and heavy heads, and at the same time, everybody still was able to do what they do best for our kids, to teach, to love on them, to be there, and to show up. And like you said, Teresa, you said it best. They're still taking care of our kids. Still, our kids are still learning, and the need hasn't changed. We still have a bottleneck, but our teachers still are extraordinary. And it reminded me, as I was thinking, as I was placing my hand on my heart and looking at that flag over there, and as we heard an amazing, amazing rendition of the Star-Spangled Banner from our Lewis Palmer High School students, I was reminded of the privilege and the freedom that we have in this country to vote, to decide who our leaders are, and to decide the directions of our community. And those that put themselves out there to run, it takes grit. And so I congratulate Mr. Schwartz, I congratulate you, Ms. Phillips, and I congratulate you, Mr. Clausen. And part of that freedom, most of that freedom, all of that freedom comes from the sacrifice of our veterans. And I too attended a couple Veterans Day assemblies. My dad was able to actually be a part of the one at Palmer Ridge. And it was so touching to see my dad standing there next to Red, as a matter of fact. And the reverence and the respect that those students gave to our veterans. When Taps was played, the silence as they stood silently in reverence and respect was chilling, and it touched my dad to tears. A man that's seen more than his share of battles on the battlefield in Vietnam, and jumping out of airplanes and flying helicopters, and those students, he said, were why he did what made it worth it to him as a veteran. And it also reminded me of the reverence we have as a community, because the Veterans Day assemblies were all over our school district, from from Palmer Ridge High School to MA to Kilmer, Lewis Palmer Elementary, Bear Creek. So thank you, veterans. Thank you, Red, for your sacrifice and for that freedom for us to be able to vote and decide. I think we received valuable feedback from our town hall, and I want to thank all of you guys for your leadership at that. And I see that we need to work harder to get out and communicate with our community, both internally and externally, from our bus drivers to our business owners. But I saw that town hall as an avenue to collaborate. I saw an openness to give feedback as displayed right there on the butcher paper, and I think that's valuable information that we can glean. I personally am and will continue to meet and listen and learn from anybody and everybody who wants to seek input and give input. I will meet with anybody to have coffee anytime, and I hope not just me, but us as a group and as individuals, and I hope that everybody feels, I want folks to feel comfortable and free to share their perspectives with us and to collaborate with us. And we're as liaisons, and that there's a communication process that I please continue to share. This is our community and these are our kids, and I'm hopeful that through this process that we can continue and do better and make sure that we are taking care of our students. I think we have it in us. I know that we as a community have it in us to do what's best for our kids. It takes hard work, and I will continue to work as hard as I can for our kids, with our community members, with each other, with our educators, from all four corners and all aspects of our community. So speaking of the preschool program, I don't know why I caveated and jumped to that, but we were able to fill all of our Colorado preschool program slots. And for those that don't know, these are students that must qualify based on a financial need basis. The state allotted us 60 slots, and we filled all of those. We as a preschool program committee conducted site visits last week, and just to see the learning opportunities and the environment that we're able to provide these young students, and the way in which our teachers teach is a testament to its value. But even more of a testament is the learning that takes place throughout their educational journey as they become members of our society and learn and grow from kindergarten up to 12th grade and beyond. And the early child, that's all based on that early childhood education and a foundation that I think is well worth the investment. And then there's the hugs and the smiles that makes it definitely worth it. And so last week was those hugs and smiles from our preschoolers were definitely a highlight and an uplifting way to end the week. Today's generation of students are different, I think, than any other that's come before them. They're more in tune. They don't know life before the internet. They're less likely to experiment with sex or alcohol, but they're more likely to be addicted to nicotine. Many more have been diagnosed with learning disorders, but many more are driven to succeed. Our kids have compassion, and I think that that's what makes it worth sitting here, being a part of something bigger than ourselves. Drew, Elijah, Joe, Eli, Co, and Taryn, as they demonstrate to us. I did like when they talked about their 30-second speech, because anybody who knows me, that's something that maybe I should take that class with them. My 30-second elevator pitch often becomes a 30-minute chat, as many folks know. But those are life skills that continue that start at the foundation of preschool and go beyond. And I think that that's something that we do well for our kids. We had our DAC meeting last week, and Rick Frempton presented on our exceptional needs services. We have an increase of about 5% in our school district of students that are exceptional needs students. We also talked about the Elorium Day Awards that will be coming up in April, and the nominations will open up February. And what that is, in case anybody doesn't know, our Elorium Day Awards is where members of our community can nominate other members of our community, from teachers to a dentist, on how someone goes above and beyond to make impact and the difference in the life of a student who's impacted. And so he also presented on what is the Special Education Advisory Committee and what we do, and how we did, next January, this coming January, the Resource Exchange will be presenting on what is life after high school for these students, what else is out there. So what career and pathways are available. So it was a reminder also that we do serve our kids. We do a good job serving our kids, but we can do better, and we can do better as a community to serve our kids. So.
Thank you, Ms. Upchurch. I want to thank my fellow board members for their comments tonight. You could probably sense the common theme about our feelings regarding 4A not passing. One could speculate why that may have occurred, but the bottom line is, as board members, we need to roll up our sleeves and figure out what we're going to do to take care of our kids and, quite frankly, our teachers as well. I've had the privilege of being at LP Middle School several times since November 5th, including one opportunity where myself and Ms. Phillips and Mr. Taylor, and I believe Ms. Upchurch was out of town. We provided breakfast for our teachers there and team members. And it was a very, very small token of our appreciation for them. But one of the challenges we have in this community, it's one of the highest performing, it's one of the fastest growing, and we have not been able to educate our community members sufficiently to get a bond passed. So as Mr. Taylor articulated, we're going to have to roll up our sleeves and look at all options. And ultimately, all options aren't going to be, how should I put this, everyone's number one choice. But the bottom line is we need to take care of our kids, and secondly, we need to take care of our teachers. I believe the town hall was a good start. I saw many people there that I hadn't seen on any school functions for many years. And I think this first process is what we see over here, listening to the community members as far as what we're doing well and what we need to improve on. So we look forward to continuing that dialogue and informing our public as far as what we're doing and how we need their support. I also want to thank our veterans for their service to our country. We had many great assemblies. My daughter had the privilege of being selected as one of the students that wrote an essay, and due to professional commitments, I wasn't there, but I was able to watch a video clip of her. And I think it's very impressive of what our kids think of our veterans and those that are in active service for our country. So I want to publicly thank all those that serve and have served in the past. On a different note, I had the privilege of representing the board by attending the various volleyball games of PR and LP on Saturday, including the championship game. I had one parent ask who I was rooting for, and my response was whoever had the ball. And we're looking forward to recognizing both of those teams at our December board meeting. Lastly, I want to thank everyone that is involved in supporting our kids in the district, either with 4A, volunteering, or whatever it might be. It really takes a village to raise a child, and we're very fortunate to be in this community. So with that being said, I will turn the time over to Dr. Summers.
Thank you, Mr. Clausen. Thank you, board. I'm going to echo some of the same sentiments that were already shared, but do so in an abbreviated way. First, from the standpoint that there's just so much in our community in terms of the appreciation that we have, first and foremost, for our veterans, our servicemen and women, and those special ceremonies that you already made mention of. I'm just very appreciative of the efforts from those school staff and schools that took the time to do so in such a special way. Also want to give kudos to our Lewis Palmer High School and Palmer Ridge High School student councils for organizing and coordinating our Harvest of Love food drive, which of course supported Tri-Lakes Cares in preparation for holiday basket needs and stocking our food pantry, as well as some financial donations. Just some small ways of showing the power of our community connecting with each other and looking out for those in need. Certainly has been a lot of fantastic accomplishments across the athletic front, as was already mentioned. Also would like to give kudos to our Lewis Palmer High School boys soccer team on their semifinal run, and we still have our Palmer Ridge High School football boys who are competing. I believe the game will be this Saturday. Hope to see everyone there, as well as, again, just kudos to what a performance from both of our high schools and our girls volleyball teams to bring home 2 trophies and to demonstrate just excellence across the board, and more so than just the athletic accomplishments, but the sportsmanship that was also demonstrated was really inspiring. We had some fantastic musical performances as well. Lewis Palmer High School, the Once on This Island performance, and Palmer Ridge's Into the Woods. Just fantastic talents that were on display, and all the various components that go into those performances are testament to the time and the dedication, not only of our students, but the staff that support those as well. Also would like to make mention of November 18th through 22nd this week, marking National Education Association's 98th annual celebration of American Education Week, which honors the team of people who work in our nation's public schools, everyone from our bus drivers to classroom teachers, cafeteria workers, admin staff, plus countless others. This 2019 theme, this year's theme is Reach, Educate, and Inspire, and that is being reflected throughout the week. We have a few notable celebration days, including tomorrow being Parents Appreciation Day, Wednesday, November 20th, Education Support Professionals Day, and Friday, November 22nd, Substitute Educators Day as well. And then I don't have this on script, but I think it's worth mentioning, and this will also segue into the next couple of items on our agenda. I really value the passion in which our board has spoke this evening regarding the current state, if you will, in our community. Obviously, we have a lot of work in front of us, but I also appreciate everybody's efforts to do what needs to be done, and there's a lot in front of us. There's no easy answers per se, but I'm a big believer in the process that we use being as important in terms of how we go at this, as well as where we ultimately land, and that is a big conversation for us to have, and it's one that we're going to commit to as district administration. I think you're also hearing from our board. Our partnership in that process is going to be extremely important, so I'm excited and eager to share some of the more detailed information that we have prepared for you this evening, and I'll reserve some additional commentary as well as questions that we can interact with as we shift gears into our agenda.
I believe that segues into our next agenda item, your Listen and Learn Tour.
Can we cue the PowerPoint, please? And if it's okay with you, I'll probably just keep seated here. So as we're cueing the presentation, just so we're all working off the same page here. This represents a summary to date of listening and learning sessions that were part of the entry plan that was prepared in the transition portion of my entry into this role. And so I shared with you what phase one really consisted of in regards to spending time with our community to really understand by listening and learning to the members of our community. So tonight I'm going to give you an update on where we currently situate in regards to the information gleaned from those sessions, discuss implications of the work, and talk through some potential next steps. So the purpose of the listening and learning tour is really to begin to understand the perspectives and voices from our various stakeholders. My initial frame for that was really around identifying values, challenges, as well as expectations for leadership. The scope of those, and this seems in some ways like a long time ago, although it was only a few months, spent some time with open community forums in July, segueing into the beginning of the school year with multiple opportunities to visit and spend time with various constituents. Primarily, the staff sessions occurred August through October. That was scheduled with 30-minute staff engagement sessions at each of our schools. As a side note, I have also been able to secure a date to do the same thing at Monument Academy Charter School, which I think is an important distinction to make. But at this point, I've had the opportunity to visit with multiple staff. Almost every single one of our staff members has had an opportunity. I will tell you that I've also done this beyond just our school sites with our transportation department, with our Big Red staff, and various staff along the way. So if I haven't talked to you yet, please know I'm all ears, and I will find you, or you can find me. I'm also very motivated to begin to formalize more conversations with our students. And while data from student conversations is not necessarily presented within this update, that will be something that will be ongoing as we go forward. And then parent conversations haven't necessarily taken on a format of a particular listening format, but I've spent time at multiple parent-teacher organization meetings and accountability committee meetings where there's been an opportunity for some back and forth. So what you have here is, I would say, close to an opportunity as much as possible to share where I've been and what I've heard in those different spaces and from our different voices, but more to come. So I'm going to summarize this initially from a broad community feedback perspective, and this was also information that was shared last Thursday at the town hall that we've referenced here. So from the values perspective, and this was responses that were summarized and synthesized according to specific themes that were coming through a very broad question: what do we value in District 38? And so you can see here a pretty comprehensive list. I would not necessarily say that this has every single value articulated, but these were the emerging themes that were summarized from the different engagement sessions. Of note, when you look at our positive student learning experiences, students leaving D38 well prepared for success, and a very positive reception on the overall quality of education that our community is experiencing from their time in our schools, there is a lot to be proud of. We know that that involves dedication, talent, commitment from our teachers and staff, as well as strong parent involvement and family support, and then an overall community involvement and value of education. And as I summarize some of this, I also will acknowledge that at times you might see bullets here that say, yes, this is true, and at other times, but what does that really mean, as we put that in the context of decisions that we may be making, whether it's regarding a mill and a bond or just an overall perception. So when we talk about these being truths, I would say that there's a lot of nuances that also need to be noted, but these were the responses as they came in. I'll also of note, focus on the whole child development, flexibility and choice, open dialogue, communication, and transparency. In terms of challenges, something that I think we at times may not always be spending enough time talking about is the fact that we have a variety of needs across our diverse student spectrum, and that there are significant challenges that we're confronted with as we work to meet the needs of all of our students. Certainly the impact of our population growth and how we are addressing that, which also goes along with that third bullet there of facilities utilization. When I initially had the parentheses of an ongoing issue since 2009, I think that signified the decision that was made in 2009 to, at that time, consolidate and go from a 2 middle school model into 1. And of course, we are still reeling from that decision that was made several years ago. But I think it also extends to prior to 2009, there were other issues that were also lifted up. Specifically, the decision to build Palmer Ridge High School has been brought up as a decision that was made at the time that has had different implications for our community. Communication is always something that I think we hear when we ask for feedback, and an opportunity to be more clear, be more open, and that was also shared this evening as we went through some of our comments. Fiscal responsibility, or the lack thereof, kind of speaks for itself, but that's a huge need I think that we're hearing from our community, is how are we making sense of our current fiscal state and where we need to go from here. Certainly staff retention and morale is something that is brought up often, and we could dive into that topic in more detail as we keep going. Safety, security, and mental health for and of students. That is a topic that is not only local in nature, but also at a national level, and something that I think we're working very hard at, but it's also a resource issue. It's also a training issue. There's many different variables that go into how are we currently ensuring our safety, security, and mental health needs being met. Relationship with Monument Academy. This is something that I think is a priority for how we forge ahead and demonstrate where we want to go as a community in terms of the relationship between our district and our charter school. And then the importance of having civil conversations with one another. Lastly, in terms of advice and expectations around community feedback, you can see accessibility and visibility. The treading lightly regarding the Monument Academy High School matter, I know that's something that certainly was a hot topic as I became, actually I think in June, there was some public commentary that came about, and that continues to be of concern within our community. There's an acknowledgement of how we're working to address our teacher issues, including recruiting, retention, and compensation. Communication, and I could probably say communication through all of this. Trust, truth, and transparency. Keeping a hard skin, or developing one, however you may look at that. Stewarding our money better, bridging gaps in our community, and long-range planning, which is another theme that continues to bubble up. I wanted to point out a difference between the way that community feedback and staff feedback was collected. So the staff feedback sessions, in order to get every individual voice into the room and then allow for some small group share out and some whole group share out, used a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 process. The 5 was represented in 5 points of pride. And so what you see in front of you is a synthesis of the key emerging themes that came forward from the nearly 700 staff responses that this represents, both from the school sessions that were conducted, as well as some of the various departments that I mentioned earlier. So this is not meant to signify every point that was listed, but these were the high response items, if you will. And I struggle to give you an exact percentage, but I would tell you that generally speaking, over 50% or more of respondents are reflected in the bullets that you see in front of you here. So 5 points of pride in our district. Starting with, we have great staff, great employees, great workplace. There's a positive feel in terms of what people experience every day when they show up to work. We have strong academics and a very overall quality education. Again, you're seeing some overlap in some themes that were collected as well from the community survey and sessions. Our kids, our students, just so much to be proud of with so many of their accomplishments and just the great kids that they are. The support for our students. We prioritize really getting to know our kids and looking at them as the whole child, not just kids in terms of their academic performance, but really their social and emotional growth. And I can't tell you how many stories there are from just a variety of people, both our staff and people in the community, that said or say, continue to say that they are getting the personalized and individualized treatment that they believe their child deserves. And I think that just is a testament again to what our people are doing each and every day to prioritize the needs of each and every one of our students. And again, positive community, positive leadership, positive parents and families. So while there's a lot of positivity and there's a lot to celebrate there, we know that there's also another side that we have to be mindful of in that process. So the Four represented 4 words that capture the essence. So this would be just a simple response. What are 4 words that describe our current state? And so you can see here a variety of different words. Some that are clearly more positive in nature, caring, compassionate, excellence, commitment, dedication, achievement, kid-centered, kids first, pardon me, hardworking, a lot of pride, a lot of team. There's also words that reflected things like division or being divided. And these don't all show up here for you. Again, I summarized the words that were more typical that came forward, but things like overcrowded. We had also words that reflected frustrating, difficult. So my point here is that, yes, while there's a lot of positive, there was also a reflection of, bless you, being more than just a lot of positive words that came forward from our staff. 3 things that you wish would or should change. Now, understand that this was very open-ended, so there was no prompt or expectation for any particular response, and everyone had the opportunity to share exactly what was on their mind. So funding rose to the top of the list, both in terms of pay as well as staff retention, the need for an MLO, bonds. Fee reductions also came up as a component within funding. Our community relations problems. You can see school times, calendar, schedules, curriculum, and policies that also fit into that bill. A need for more staff, including paras, bus drivers, mental health workers. An increase in resources, specifically technology, bubbled up quite a bit. We also heard a need for more buses or newer buses. Communication and listening, again, in all areas, and then an increase in security. And as a side note, there wasn't necessarily the prompt to say go into more detail with that. So while this was meant to be fairly open-ended, some people would go into a lot more detail, others would just keep it very generalized. The 2 represented 2 personal commitments, and so this was an opportunity to also hear from staff in terms of what their priorities were as they approached this school year. So doing their best, giving their all, being 100% in, working hard, supporting colleagues, supporting the district, love, care for, commit to, help, support, connect with, role model for. Continue education, get better at the job, improve instruction, building relationships and communication. So I think this reflects a spirit of continuing to improve and approaching the work with a growth mindset. And then lastly, the 1 represented 1 best hope for D38 in 3 years. The funding issue, again, was an overwhelming majority of responses. I would tell you it was easily in the 90% range, and heard a lot in terms of an increase in pay, passing a bond, staff retention, smaller class sizes, again, the community relationship component, continuing our academic excellence, increasing resources, and then making mental health a priority. So what I would tell you at this point is that there will need to be a continuing engagement of all stakeholders in our collaborative conversations. And I'm putting students at the top of that list because I think their voice is essential for me to continue to hear and elevate in the equation. Also, how we're structuring this with parent groups, again, various community groups, and continuing to work with our staff. Really, as we think about how we're focusing our efforts around the development of a strategic plan, I think a big component of that strategic plan is how we define our vision, our mission, our values, and our goals. We need to revisit our long-range planning, facilities planning efforts, as well as how we prioritize educating our community around school finance. Part of what's interesting, and I'm still learning quite a bit here, is that it's not like this would be the first time we've had some of these conversations. However, there's still a lot of unanswered questions, I think, that our community has, and we need to do our due diligence to make sure that there's a clear sense of where we are as well as where we're going. And then lastly, and this would be sort of a summary slide of what I believe represents at a very high level our responsibility as we work with our community to educate first and foremost. That's what we are, educators after all, and prioritizing education. Engagement, What does it look like to engage our community in meaningful and transparent ways? And then ultimately empower. I think sometimes when we stop with engagement, we lose track of then what role does any individual person in our community play in an equation of moving us forward to exactly the type of future that we want in our district. And I would emphasize right now that we need to spend time thinking more about our future and less about the past. Now, granted, we need to acknowledge and we need to address past issues that have maybe gotten our way. But one of the questions that I'm continuing to ask when past issues are brought up is, what is it going to take for that to be addressed in such a way where there's healing and there's hope for the future? Or another way of looking at it is, how long are we going to allow the past to hold our future hostage? Because when I hear things come up about what happened in 2006, all due respect to the fact that there were people here and those were real issues, we're going into 2020. And at some point we need to start thinking about not only where are we at in 2020, where are we at in 2025, where are we at in 2030, where are we at with our current kindergarten class of students, that's the graduating class of 2032 and beyond. So not to lose sight of, again, real issues that I know had real consequences. I think there's a lot we could learn from that, and certainly I'm not looking to blame or point the finger at any one person or any one issue, but how do we make sure that we factually get back to a place of who we are, what we're about, and ensuring that all of our constituents are engaged in this process. So I feel like we're really at a point right now where we know what we need to do. How are we going to do it? And with that, I will open the floor to any questions, knowing that we have one additional topic that's going to involve a little bit more conversation. So any questions, though, about what this presentation has provided?
So I do have a question. So you've presented a lot. It's actually almost overwhelming to try and take it all in. But you know what I wonder about is our board itself, how we have functioned and how we might function better. And I'd like to have some conversation around that. What is our role as a board member? I think it would be good that we'll come to some agreement of what is our role. I mean, we represent the community, but how do we do that? This isn't a paid position, right? We're volunteers. We're given our best, but I do feel that we failed. And so not to cling to the past, my point is what could we do better? How can we better serve our community? Because aren't we essentially the conduit of the community to Dr. Summers and the administration? And I'd like us to figure out, well, how do we do that better? And I don't see that in anything you've presented, but I'd like to add it if we could somehow, some way.
I think that's an excellent point. I also think that will be a segue into some of what we heard from last Thursday, because that was actually a few different bullet points that were brought up in the conversation, as well as ideas that are bubbling or surfacing as we continue to engage that conversation with our community. But I think rather than say, hey, what is the role and how do we actually do this, it'd be nice to have a succinct definition. I think intuitively we may know it, and actually there's training that you guys experience, and that part of my responsibility is to help synthesize and cement. But we can know it up here. To what extent is the community aware of it, and what difference does it make, I think is going to be a real key consideration as well. So it's a great point.
Thanks.
Can I just ask a clarification on your community feedback -values slide? It says flexibility and choice. How do you interpret that? I wasn't sure what it was referring to.
The context of that particular bullet, I think, reflected the fact that families enjoy the fact that they have choice in which school they attend, and that we do have a viable charter option within our community that is part of that choice perspective.
Okay.
there are any additional questions or comments, we'll move on to the next agenda item, election follow-up.
So we do have the raw data that was transferred from the chart paper that you can see over to your right, as well as, so there's an electronic copy that's a little bit difficult to read, but it is in the agenda, and there's also a hard copy that's in front of you. And I think the best way, if it's okay, to invite the board to just dive into this a little bit is to start from a place of what learning did you have from Thursday's meeting, and specific to some of what you're seeing in the comments, or the ideas, rather, that were set forth. What are we noticing, and where do we go from here? And maybe, if I may, as I'm saying this out loud, and I'm thinking there may be people that aren't quite sure what happened on Thursday. Maybe I could start by giving a summary of what actually occurred on Thursday. So for those of you that were in attendance, there was an opportunity for anyone in our community, and we were certainly tasked with a little bit of constraint in our location, but the location of our meeting happened to be at Monument Town Hall. We had, I would say, roughly around 80 to 90 folks that were in attendance. The capacity of that room is right around 80, and I know we were right at capacity. So the intro of that meeting, and please, if there's any board that would like to add into this, feel free to, was essentially an invitation for the community to engage in some conversation and some dialogue around what our next steps could look like. As we processed through the best format for that event, one of the things that we wanted to prioritize was ensuring that every voice in attendance was respected and heard to the extent that was possible with a pretty large crowd. So what we ended up making the determination to do was using a small group breakout brainstorm session. And the format of that session was really around prioritizing the principles of classic brainstorming, which is ultimately to say that there is no such thing as a bad idea. In fact, the priority that we had was to collect every idea. And so there was a series of idea generations that were represented from individual voices from around the room. We had facilitators there, as was mentioned earlier. So some of our district administrators were in a position where they had the training to be able to engage in that small group facilitation. The point being that it needed to have a little bit of structure in order to ensure that every voice was heard. As ideas were generated, and you can see those exactly as they were stated on the white paper, we made sure that we exhausted all those ideas in small groups. The responses, or the ideas themselves, were responses to two basic questions. One, and I'm summarizing here, what do we value in our community, and how are we using those values to move into the future? And the second was, what ideas do we have to address our challenges? And so after people were organized into small groups of about 10 or so, give or take, each of those groups spent probably a good 45 minutes processing through their brainstorming phase. In order then to elicit the consensus of what the best ideas were that were generated, we engaged in a 10-4 voting process, which is just a fancy way of getting everybody's vote across a variety of ideas. So what you actually see in front of you are the 7 small groups, and every idea that was brought forth or submitted in that group, along with, in parentheses, the number of votes that specific ideas received. So the intent was not to say that necessarily these are the only ideas, but these were, from the group's perspective, the best ideas based on the individuals that were voting for those respective ideas around the table. And then we closed the event by allowing or inviting every small group to present their top 3 to 5 ideas. And we said that we would collect all this information, and in compiling it, make sure that we summarized it and then presented it again, which we are doing tonight, and will recirculate again with all staff in our community, so that this is at least a starting point for a conversation as we move forward. Is there anything that I'm missing that you guys would like to chime in with. So back to, I think, the original question being, what did you glean from that night from your individual perspectives, and what are you noticing as you're getting a chance to get your eyes back on these themes?
I had the privilege of actually spending time with each group, and the common theme, at least one of the few, was support of our teachers. And just looking at some of these votes, it looks like 3 of the categories, that was one of the highest voting topic. So it is encouraging that we see our community members, at least the ones that were there, supporting our teachers. Then I was also somewhat perplexed that there weren't more common threads based on the voting that took place. I'd like to hear everyone else's inputs on that particular issue, or what you came away from.
Well, I noticed several common themes throughout the groups, and I thought it was actually the process. Walking around and listening and learning and watching, that everybody felt comfortable and open to share their thoughts and ideas and input. And common themes that I saw was teacher compensation, smaller class sizes, putting Grace Best to rest, communications with the community, listening to all voices and allowing all voices to have a voice at the table, which I think is the goal of these town halls. Something that I also thought was a really great idea, Chris, that you put forth, is that we continue to do these and at various locations at the different schools, not just at town hall, but at different schools and different locations, and that we continue to do these, if possible, once a month. And I thought that was a really good idea. I saw a lot of new faces too that I've never seen before, and met a lot of new folks that are eager to get engaged in our community and in our district, and I thought that was inspiring as well.
I think, Matt, speaking to your question, or in terms of not having singular things rise to the top, I think it's that there is a lot of diversity of ideas right now, and differences in how values and how we approach challenges are articulated. I think that it's a process, and we're just at the beginning steps. So I think some things, when I read through, there really isn't anything on this list we haven't heard or had conversations about. Meaning, I think that there's the broad education piece and the broad communication piece, which, are intertwined, obviously. That was one of the takeaways I got from this. And we've been talking about this already, about the education piece. How do we inform as comprehensively as we can everyone in our community? So I think that's one of the takeaways I had. Another takeaway I had from the evening and from looking at this list, beyond the diversity, is that there were a lot of people there willing to engage. And they were engaging in a very collaborative way, in a very respectful way. And I think if we can tap into that, we're going to come up with some creative approaches to things and angles on things that we may not have considered before. So to me, that's very hopeful and inspiring. But I agree. I didn't have the expectation that one single thing would come out of each group, but it is interesting to look at the numbers in parentheses. And I think it's just everyone is coming from their own context and their own experience, and they have a diversity of ideas.
I had fun. I enjoyed it a lot. I appreciated everybody's opinion, and then I heard some very diverse opinions. I agree with that. That maybe the best part of our community is its diversity, And I enjoyed hearing everyone's ideas. And I hope that we can have similar turnout at every one of our school sites. And really, what I have now is a question. Where does this go? This is great, and I enjoy it. Don't get me wrong. But, you know, we could double the numbers over here, the comments. But where does it go? Where are we going with this? That's my question, because, you know, I like this reference I've heard Dr. Summers use on multiple occasions. Let's start with the end in mind. And really, as we move forward, I'd like to have the end in mind defined so that some of our focus, and we can build on what's been done already, we don't have to redo it, so that it becomes cumulative and additive, and we get more feedback and more focus on, well, what does it mean? Where are we going? Because as much as I enjoyed it, and we got a lot of good feedback, I'm still of the inclination of, where do we go? What's next? I mean, I could have one of those every week, frankly. I enjoy it. But just for the sake of enjoyment isn't sufficient for me. I'd really like to, you know, see the big rocks, identify what these big rocks are. What is the end going to look like? Because, you know, I saw a comment or I read something here about long-range facilities planning. Well, what's our long-range technology planning? What's our long-range curriculum planning? How is that curriculum being delivered? I happen to know that, I think it's in Pueblo, one school district, when they get a snow day, they don't really have a snow day, they just switch on e-learning. Now, I'm not suggesting we'd just jump to that. I'm just saying, what does all this mean, right? And Dr. Summers, I hope, if nothing else, this is very informative to you as our leader on, you know, where are we going and how do we get there? I'm excited for the future. I think I'm more excited than ever because, as I heard here, there were people, I know of at least 10 people who were there that I know voted no. They told me. And they were engaged in trying to find solutions. That's encouraging. So I'm really excited about what's going to happen next, and I'm looking forward to it. And Dr. Summers, I look forward to helping you in any way we can to, you know, create the path forward. I don't want to use that. How we become one team, our team, for our public education system here. So my takeaway is I just had fun.
So to piggyback real quick off of what you said, Chris, yeah, when I was hopeful, I saw this as a turn the page moment. And so I agree that a lot of this this is stuff we already have heard many times over, and that I think I personally work hard to communicate with individuals and groups in addressing and discussing these. I'm under the impression that this is being used as a tool so that we can be more intentional when we move forward on our path. And well, what does that path look like according to whose path? And so I'm hopeful that we take this and that we're more inclusive moving forward with our community and intentional in what is our end goal here? What is our vision here as a collaborative community moving forward? So I saw it as a turning point. And I really appreciated that folks were engaged, and I really appreciated that it was an open dialogue where there was no bad ideas and everybody was included. Everybody got to ask questions. Everybody got to communicate their perspectives. And I thought that individuals hearing from other individuals face-to-face, I think, is also helpful. When you have that face-to-face discussion, you come up with better solutions that way. I always make the analogy of the toothpaste. You know, if you squeeze toothpaste out and you keep squeezing words out throwing things out at people, it's like toothpaste. Try and put that back in. Once it's out there, it's hard to put in. But when you're having that face-to-face dialogue, there's that new, meaningful understanding because you have that verbal communication that goes into it. And so I think having that personal communication piece and making those connections as a community with individuals, I think these are the types of communication tools that we use to be more intentional. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor, as well. I think you were the mastermind in putting that on the calendar along with Dr. Summers, so thank you, gentlemen.
So appreciate that, and I'd like to offer up just a few thoughts in summation. One of the key priorities of that evening was engaging in that civil, respectful, collaborative dialogue. And I would echo some of the same comments, that we were able to engage in that dialogue in a thoughtful and meaningful way. So that's kudos to the fact that we're intentional about making sure that all voices are being heard, that they're being respected and being valued. Now certainly there's okay, so we kind of use a protocol sometimes in education called a here's what, so what, now what. And the so what is there's a lot in front of us. But to reiterate what I think you said, Teresa, that it's not necessarily any of this is brand new thinking. It's a lot of conversations that we've had previously. It's just that those conversations haven't necessarily led us to a ultimate decision or to a landing spot that allows us to say, here's where we are. Now that we're here, where are we going? And I think that decision-making model is going to be extremely important for us. Certainly, I could tell you as a superintendent, well, here's what I think, and here is what our decision is. Now, I'm bound by policy as well as by a moral obligation to tell you that that is not the best way to operate. I don't ever want to come across as this singular voice that is going to make a decision. At times, I may be in a position where I have to come down with a bottom line, and that's with your approval in certain situations, and at times when it's engaging our staff in terms of where we are and where we're going. Those are decisions that before you make those, you want to make sure that you get every perspective, every voice heard, so that ultimately, when there are tough decisions that need to be made, you can articulate the reason for why we're making a particular decision, because it's not always going to be the popular one, or it may not always be the one that appeases every perspective. And I think that is going to be the biggest work that we have in front of us, is how we're going to engage in not only the collaborative dialogue, but in a shared decision or in ultimately a leadership decision that's going to have implications for where we are and where we're moving forward. In terms of seeing that end in mind, I think what we really could benefit from is defining exactly what we want for each and every one of our students as they graduate from our system. And so the way we prioritize that is by making sure that we have plenty of opportunity to define the profile of an ideal graduate working from our system. And I would caution right away to say every graduate is just that, an individual who has a dream or has a path that is going to lead them toward what we would envision as a successful life. But that certainly has to be something that's representative of the talents, the dreams, the strengths of the individuals that we're supporting, that are in our care. So as we engage in that conversation, that helps set a path for what does it look like in the world that they're about to work in. Certainly we have a starting point for that in terms of our why statement. So when you think about what that represents, this is why we educate. I think in order to take a next step and use that perhaps as a foundation for articulating what it means to be a contributing member of society, what does it mean to be local, national, even global stewards, how are we preparing each and every student for what that future path is? The other thing, and just from a fundamental practical side of what is the structure and the format for how the board and how district administration is engaging the community in future community conversations would be the way that I would term these right now. We need a time, a place, a format, expectations, as well as deliverables from each of those conversations. And at some level, it gets to a point where the message continues to be one of, we keep on hearing some of these same things, so I'll use Grace Best as an example. We have a lot of information on Grace Best. We've engaged in a lot of conversations over the years about Grace Best, and yet there's still a lot of questions. So it kind of gets to a point where the best way for us to respond to what is the need is for us to be able to articulate a set plan and say, here is where we're at and here's where we're going with Grace Best. And that's just one example of what I think can be articulated in more of that long-term plan. But some of these issues are more short-term in nature. And then lastly, I think we need to get really clear on what is it looking like to either go back for a bond and or where do we stand in relationship to a mill levy override. And at what point do we want to present those options or possibilities to our public for consideration. And so if we're leaning in a direction where I think we heard from some groups that very evening that sooner the better, what are the implications of that? We are going to need to present what those possibilities or alternatives are in a pretty short turnaround. I would, right now, if I were to put a timeline on that, I would say that we need to know exactly where we're going to land as early as March. And that might be even too late because some people would say, if we're really going for it, then you need to do it at least a year out. So how are we consulting with folks that are going to help us in the construction of what a bond or a mill package would look like, and where does that situate in regards to going back to the community? So I know that's a lot, but I'm excited to be on the journey with you all, and I think we're up to the task.
Perfect. Additional comments before we move on?
No, I actually have a question then. So, based on conversations we've had, I don't think we're going to have a comprehensive strategic plan in place that quickly, are we?
I think we can have a framework for the plan with additional details to be fleshed out. I think there's certain components of how that plan is being developed that we can answer sooner rather than later, but I also don't want to rush the fact that it does take time to do this job well, because we don't want to rush it in such a way that we're not giving ample opportunity for engagement and feedback. And I think that's the other thing, is visualizing a continuous loop of what we present, what we share as ideas, and how are we getting feedback on that, and how do we continue to refine and shape the content of that plan as we continue to go forward.
So I'm just going to make a couple of comments. The things I've learned as we've tried to campaign for 4A. You know, our district has not been successful in passing bonds, and I've had some people say, just go ahead and do it again, you'll fail again. So there's multiple sides here. And what I've seen is districts like Cheyenne Mountain, is that D12 or D20? They have a mill levy that's fixed. And they do all of their budgeting or strategic forecasting, their costing within that fixed budget. The beauty of a fixed budget, if it's a fixed mill, then the entire school district public education system shares proportionally to that, which is a good thing because it's a unifying thing. And the challenge I have for each of you is to consider, how do we go from let's pass another bond or try and pass another bond to, is there another way? And maybe it's to come up with, I was hopeful that we would see a strategic plan that would kind of lay out, you know, here's a sustainable school model, and it's going to be, we can do the modeling of what the mill would need to be. We're at 44, D20's at 60, D12 is at 55. We're at 44, and I guarantee you in about a month, we're going to see that go down to around 41. So the nice thing is, for those who voted no, is there's a tax cut coming, which is awesome for the taxpayers. However, I hope everybody appreciates that 41 compared to 60 or 41 compared to 55, there's something in that picture that I don't think it's my neighbors who don't want to support public education. I don't get it. I'm really confused. Why is it the way it is? We can't pass a bond, and yet we pay the lowest mill almost in the state, but particularly in our area. We have the lowest mill. So kudos to those who, work so hard to make this fail, because their success is about a 3-point reduction in our mill for next year for property tax owners. That's the current situation. It's been dropping year over year. It was at 49 not that many years ago, near 50. We're going to be pushing 40 now. 40 mills, let me be clear. 40 mills on our assessed value, so that essentially our taxes are going down fairly significantly. Let's see, 50 down to 40 is roughly 15% reduction. It's not quite 25%. Maybe it's closer to 20%. Yeah, 20% reduction in taxes just from school public education funding. So the irony, the sadness is I better not say that.
I think it also represents some of the comments that we saw from last Thursday, which include what are the consequences of exactly what that decline in those mills are, and you can list them in a number of ways. So what's the impact to the taxpayer? Great. What's the impact to our staff? What's the impact to our students? And what's the impact to our ability as a system to be able to sustain the type of excellence that our people are used to experiencing in this great community? Because I think the overwhelming concern that I continue to hear from our staff is, how can we be expected to continue to deliver that quality educational experience in a state of declining resources? And
rightfully
there
so.
are real and tangible consequences that we have to spell out. We also, I think, have to educate as best we can and continue to educate, or do a better job of educating, because I'm hearing a lot of feedback that people are still confused on what exactly is a mill, what exactly is a bond funding, what is a MLO funding, et cetera. So, and then within that, what are the specifics? So what does it mean if we're going from 44 mills down to 41? What does that actually mean, again, as it spells out across our entire spectrum? But I think as we continue to bring up the issue of what's the impact to our primary customer or consumer, if you will, it is our kids. It has to be. Where are we prioritizing our children as part of that conversation?
Kind of following along with what Dr. Summers says, is we learned from our mistake in 2018. Granted, the numbers were more favorable in 2019 for 4A, but I think one of the topics that we need to address at a work session meeting is what a drop dead date is going to look like, when it's going to be. So as a board, we need to decide, Dr. Summers said March. I was thinking more along the lines of February. What, if anything, this board's going to do? And obviously, we're not going to make that decision at a work session meeting, but it needs to be on our radar screens.
Yeah, I think we need all options, like you said, Chris, on the table. I think there's another way to view the bond, and when you said February, I'm thinking January. But, as soon as possible, because if we were to put something on the ballot in the next year, it's a continuum of what we've already started.
Yogi Berra was a catcher for the New York Yankees, and one of his things was, it's deja vu all over again. And that's what I'm hearing. And if we just can do it again, I think, in fact, what's the definition of insanity? It's doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different outcome. So I'm not, I respectfully dissent from what I'm hearing. I think this strategic plan, and if we have to get resources to help David and the accounting staff to put it together so that we can actually see, because frankly, I'm not interested in doing another bond and ignore teachers' salary. our teacher's salary, and I'd like a full valid comparison. What are our teachers making by level compared to D20 or compared to D12? I'd like to see that. And I'd like to have our community understand what that means. I'd also like to know, where are we on our curriculum? Are we current or not? How much have we already, I mean, there's an ugly term called deferred maintenance, you know, because we've struggled to get by. Now we're at 44 mills, and I'm just not ready. I'm not ready to say, do another bond or do an MLO. What is it for?
Well,
We'd have to
Kristen,
clarify
I
it.
apologize if I misspoke. I'm not there either.
No, I'm not either.
But by not making a decision, we are making a decision. So the only thing I'm proposing is that as a board, we set a time frame where we are going to make a decision. Because I'm sorry?
A decision to
either move forward with something in 2020 or not. You know, you bring up a lot of good ideas. You know, District 20 has, in my opinion, a great model to accommodate growth. But there's a lot of variables to that as well. So I think that dialogues need to continue amongst ourselves and with the public. But once again, I don't want to be dealing with this issue in July or August and this board say, well, I think we need to pull the trigger. So once again, I think we need to set as a board a realistic time frame if we're going to do something or not. And once again, I would like to see that in the February time frame as one board member.
Well, that's why I was somewhat aggressive in scheduling what next, because I'm as anxious as anyone. Sure. But I actually want to do it under the leadership of Dr. Summers and this strategic plan, because more than a dozen, maybe 2 dozen times, somebody asked me about our plan, and I don't have an answer to that.
And that's a legitimate request.
Yeah, and I've had several conversations. Casey, I have a question for you in terms of, you mentioned a framework being developed. Can you throw me a timeline?
I'd like to begin that conversation with you at the December 3rd work session. And
Okay.
what I'd like to show you and share is, here is exactly what a strategic plan could look like. We could even look at a couple of what other districts have done. But I think what we need to spell out are specifically, what are the questions that we have in relationship to identifying exactly the needs that we've set forth. I think we already have a pretty good sense of what they are. But I think within that, then what we're saying is, what are all the possible options for us to be able to consider? Now, that takes legwork. That does take time to be able to make sure that not only are we telling you what those look like at a high level, but then what are the details? What is the cost of each of those? And then how does that actually create a sense of what are the needs that we're trying to address? And how are we prioritizing those needs in relationship to what exactly would we envision going for as early as next budget cycle, or excuse me, next election cycle, knowing that the budgetary implications of that are such that we are constantly working with some moving targets. But I think you've alluded to a couple of things that we want to be able to hit the ground or the road with as we launch community conversations. My vision right now would be that we are doing that as soon as we kick off the new year in January, a series of community conversations, starting with a description of exactly what is the current state, financial state of D38 as it pertains to how we're using our current operating revenue, and specifically sharing things like, here's what it looks like every dollar that comes into our system. If you were to whittle it down to $1, what are the percentages that we're spending on everything from salaries and benefits to our operating expenses, and break that down across every layer of our organization. I would like to then compare how we're spending our dollar to some of the other districts that you've already identified, because I think that basically shapes a picture of, here is how we're currently stretching our dollar. I will tell you right now, we already know that we're not bringing in as much as other districts, and yet we continue to do more with less. We continue to actually perform in spite of the fact that our resources have declined over time. And at some point there's a breaking point. And so we might be already experiencing the beginning of that breaking point with some other data that we can present to you. But ultimately what that does is it paints a path of what are our priorities that we would like to see based on the values that we're identifying, based on the vision that we're articulating, and what is the timeline that we would want to move on. Is that something that we want to do as soon as possible, which would be next election season? Or is that something, can we afford to ultimately wait? I think that would be essentially the question that we would have in front of us. I know there's other ways of looking at that in terms of timing and politics and so on and so forth. But I think from our standpoint, giving you that exact information, sharing that with our community, continuing to get ideas and input from our community in that space would allow us to, by, I think I said as late as March, but as early as February, we could be in a position where we can ultimately make that decision, knowing that there's still work to be done on that strategic plan. So if you think about it, it's almost like road work. It's under construction, or we're paving a new path, but as we're paving that new path, we have to continue to travel the same road that's in front of us. And in some ways, we're actually trying to replace the tires on the car that's moving, which is a dangerous place to be. And Mr. Schwartz, that's a little tip of the cap to you over there for that analogy. It's something that we are going to have to help make sense of as best we can, knowing that there's a lot that we have in front of us to make a decision on. And we have to make an informed decision, and obviously we have to give you as much information as we can, both now and continue to engage the community with that information going forward. So I feel like right now I'm paving a path for our administrative team that says, I don't know that we'll have much time for a break over December or January. I'm kidding a little bit, but not much. But yes, by the work session, to answer your question again, we'll be able to share and shape what the context of that will look like, while the content will still take some time to develop.
Kathy, would you mind emailing us the strategic plan for the District 20, District 12, and why don't we do DUCO as well? Just so we have something to look at.
49s also?
We could do 49 if you'd like.
If I could, before we commit to exactly those, just make sure I screen those and shape anything, because there may be others that I've also learned from that aren't in our immediate neighborhood. What I'd like to do is give you a couple within our unique context, as well as a couple that, because everyone does it a little bit differently. And what I would encourage it for us is that we do our own from the standpoint that here's everything that we have that we already know we're working through, and how it can work within a broader framework of what we've been shaping through this conversation.
That would be fine. More than anything, I just want to basis. I've seen many strategic plans, but I haven't reviewed a whole lot related to school districts. So
we're happy to support you in that effort, as well as make sure that we can present that to you at the work session on the 3rd in a way that gives you a good sense of the what, the how, as well as the why.
Anything else before we move on? All right, enrollment impact data. Enrollment impact data.
And these are information items for you, just as a reminder. So unless there's specifics you want to discuss, it's more just giving you an update on where things currently stand with the corresponding documentation.
It was a zero-sum game, wasn't it? Few pluses, few minuses, net zero.
Based on this graph. Plot line.
Have we turned into the CDE the October count yet?
Yes.
Great.
So that is being validated on their end, and we should know, I believe, December, what that official count will come in as. You can see on the corresponding attachment the change from the October count by school. And so yes, it is 0 across the board, plus or minus, depending on what site we're talking about. A few kids here and there.
So when the October count is in, then how long before we'll be able to know what the net opt-in, opt-out number is? How long does that take?
Are you referring to in-district choice?
No, I'm referring to what's on our website about out of our district and into our district.
I believe that timeline corresponds to CDE's timeline of finalization, so I would anticipate, again, mid-December into January.
So we should have it by mid-December, or by the year end, maybe?
Mr. Cruz, do you have a better read on that than what I'm already referring to?
By January? Yeah,
Where
because you have
that's
to
actually
know the
published.
other districts' reports. Right. The reason I'm asking the question, I think, is obvious to everyone here, but for public consumption, I would like to know what closing open enrollment cost us in terms of head count, which is revenue, right? So that's what my curiosity.
And as I believe we discussed last meeting, it's going to be a difficult number to know exactly how much we lost because we didn't necessarily receive an application from every family that was intending on being here, but we can tell you what that difference is based on the number of students that have left our district or opted toward another district versus who we currently have in choice. We certainly have lost choice from years prior based on shutting it down last year.
It's an indicator, though.
Agreed.
What's the timeline if you're making a decision to reopen choice site-based?
So we are holding true with our policy in regards to using our current capacity that we are working with based on the numbers that we know going into next year. We are within the ranges right now across the sites that have the ability to bring choice into their schools to be able to execute that policy and allow choice where there's space available. So in other words...
You're talking about executing the site-based
yes.
open enrollment.
So I'll put it a different way. I don't know that there was ever a set directive from the board that said that we weren't holding true to that policy. I believe previous administration, based on the space issues that we were experiencing as last year and the projections of last year were being analyzed, that felt like it was prudent at that time to close choice for K through 8. We are not in that same state at this point in time. So we're going to continue with the same policy that has been there, which is where we have space available, we will accept choice. So we are communicating that basically now. Okay. And choice opens January 2nd. At least the first window goes through. So you have a 6-week period. So we'll know mid-February where we stand in relationship to choice applications, which then principals and our coordinated efforts in support of their ability to accept that choice where there is space available will give us a good sense of where we're situating as we go into 2020, 2021. I hope that made sense.
You did.
Say that one more time, please. So in other words, we are communicating with our community that we are accepting choice where there's space available. And what I will tell you is that you may even have schools where, depending on the grade level, we're accepting it at some grades but not others. It just depends on where those numbers land. And our corresponding policy, again, gives us that latitude to be able to accept where we see lower class sizes.
Anything else on this topic? All right, moving on to the financial impact data.
Could I make a statement about it, first of all, to start off with? It looks a lot more like the CD website than it used to. And I think David told me that this came right out of our accounting system using the Alio report writer, which is awesome because that will save them time in. Yeah, so more focus on strategic plan, looking ahead. I like that. But one thing I would ask is, just as we have comparability on CDE, right? I can compare ourselves to D12. I'll probably always refer to D12 as our competition because my wife told me so, okay? But Cheyenne Mountain, I'd like to compare us to them all the time. And so I know we can't do it on these interim reports, but these interim reports, we could set them up to compare the two high schools, for example, or we could set up to compare the elementary schools because it's just a different output of the same database. And I believe it's all in there by site-based. So it would be interesting to see those things because what I'm really trying to get to is let's look at as many perspectives here as possible and get comfortable with what these numbers are telling us, what it means, because this is how we need to be looking at a comprehensive strategic plan is what is a new school? What's the impact, right? And I'd like to be able to drop that in and see what it looks like. That's the kind of things that we can get from a comprehensive strategic plan. So good job to Marcy and team, David and you. This is really helpful.
Questions before we move on? Okay, before I make a motion to adopt the consent agenda as presented, are there any questions or comments that we'd like to address first? I'd like to make a motion to adopt the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second.
Questions, comments, concerns? Hearing none. Ms. Namika? Mr. Clausen? Aye. Ms. Phillips?
Aye.
Mr. Taylor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. And procedurally, I have the ability to adjourn this meeting without a vote. So if there's no other business to conduct, I will adjourn the meeting.
Sounds good.
All right.
Thank you.
Stand adjourned.
Hopefully I'll be home by the holidays.